Fire. Thank all of you for joining us today, and I'd like to introduce the chairman of the AMF board, a wonderful person who's a joy to work with, is former astronaut John McBride. John is the only astronaut to have flown in space from West Virginia. We have a beautiful, the nation of West Virginia, he mentions, and he has a NASA center named after him. It's a beautiful facility. I've seen it. It's the software testing and research laboratory. It's almost heaven there, John. John was pilot of STS-41G and was scheduled to fly the next mission in March of 1986 as the commander of STS-61E. This flight was one of several flights deferred by NASA in the wake of the Challenger accident in January of 1986. And those of you who were here, it was a day very much like today. We hold those astronauts close to our hearts. John?
Thank you, Thad. What a day. Thank you, God, for this beautiful weather. And thank each and every one of you for coming out here today. I want to thank you, Thad, for all the professionalism that you've shown us here in the last few weeks as we put this program together. So thanks to you. It's been a pleasure for me to work with you during the first 6 months of his administration as the new president of AMF. With us is his predecessor, Dr. Stephen Feldman, who I had the pleasure of working with, too. So thank you for laying the groundwork for all the things that we're doing. He's had several of these. This is Thad's first. So thank you for being here. I also want to thank Kathy. Where's Kathy Gray? I'll tell you what, we couldn't do this without Kathy. So thank you very much for doing all your hard work in the background, all the folks at AMF. First of all, thank you to the students from FIT for coming up here. Thank you, Dr. Katniss, for bringing them with us. So this is really about the youth. So there's a youth element in the thread of this whole thing we're doing here today. Where are my friends from Israel? Back here somewhere? Can I see you? Boker Tov. I spent almost 2 years in Israel. There's only 6 people that speak Hebrew, and I kind of understand the language, so we're glad to have you here. Mashlom Kar, Mashlom Mer. Huh? Boker Tov? I see him back there. Toda Rabba. Shabbat Shalom and Liter Ot. Okay? Thank you for bearing with me. So we welcome the youngsters here today, and also I get asked a lot during my career over the last several years. John, if you could go back at least to 1978 when you joined NASA in that first class of astronauts, what would you change? And I have to think a while, but obviously if I had the power and the strength to reverse the tragedy we've had since 1978, erase these names from this board, obviously that would be my first choice. I don't have that power. None of us have that power. There's only one higher being that has the power to do things like that. But I'll tell you what, and I'll guarantee you that I think if I had my 7 dear friends, including classmates of mine here on my left from Challenger, and the 7 members from Columbia here on my right, and anybody in this audience or on the web or on the network here today wanted to know if any of us would go back and do it again, I'll guarantee you there would be 15 hands in the air, mine and theirs. That's because that's how strongly we believe in what we do and why we do it. And it's for these young folks. We came here today primarily. We want them to be inspired by the folks like Eileen Collins and Bob Cabana and the folks we lost on these 2 tragic missions, so that they'll follow in our footsteps like we got to follow in Alan Shepard and Gus Grissom, Neil Armstrong, and all those guys that came before us. So it's to the youth that we dedicate a lot of this actions we're doing here today. So having said that, I would like to introduce our first speaker today, a very special lady, the widow of Rick Husband. She's written a book called Higher Calling, which really attests to the testament and the spirit, the dedication of her husband, Rick, who was a commander of 107, the loss of Columbia 10 years ago today. So, Evelyn Husband Thompson, would you come and say a few words to us, please?
Good morning. First of all, I would like to thank the Astronaut Memorial Foundation for honoring and memorializing the crew of STS-107 who sacrificed their lives in pursuit of space exploration 10 years ago this very morning. although they've already been introduced, I want to say a special welcome again to the family members that are here today. First of all, my husband Bill, my son Matthew, my daughter Laura, and my dear friend Sandra. Today we gather to honor and remember the special crew of Columbia, who are regarded as national heroes, and we are not alone. Today in Israel, family members, friends, and NASA colleagues are gathered to remember the crew. In East Texas this morning, where Columbia and her crew found their final resting place, tributes are being made and memorial services today are being conducted by Columbia family members, friends, and lots of NASA folks. For many of us gathered here in Florida today, this commemoration is not only historic, it's also very personal. We remember the Columbia crew as colleagues, as friends, as parents, and as spouses. My husband Rick was the commander of STS-107. I will talk a bit more about him shortly. But he was a kind and he was a good leader who was determined to see each crew member enjoy their full potential during the mission. Willie was fun-loving and cheerful, soft-spoken and hardworking. As a commander in the Navy, he was good at everything he did, and Rick was very happy to share the cockpit with him as pilot. He loved his wife, Lonnie, intensely, and their 3 sons. Casey was absolutely brilliant with a doctorate in aerospace engineering, and she was very friendly, sometimes not an easy combination. She was thorough and detailed, yet she greatly enjoyed nature and spending time with her husband, JP, her many friends, and her family. She had the gift of hospitality and made everyone feel welcome in her home. Laurel was a doctor, a captain in the Navy, and a mom. She had a sunny disposition and a desk area that was filled with flowers. She was always ready with a kind word and a smile. She loved her family tremendously and included her son everywhere possible in her training. Mike had a smile that lit up the room. He and his wife Sandra were very close friends to Rick and I. He was a lieutenant colonel in the Air Force and the payload commander. His competency was tremendous. Mike was the father of 2 beautiful girls. His Christian faith was very important to him and was manifested in a quiet confidence that was highly respected. Dave was a super achiever. He was a captain in the Navy, a medical doctor, a pilot, a gymnast, including being an acrobat, unicyclist, and a stilt walker for a circus while he was in college. Seriously. He was also a videographer, and he filmed the crew during training and their flight. He loved his family and his dog Duggins dearly, and they meant the world to him. Elon was a tremendously gifted pilot and a colonel in the Israeli Air Force. He served as the payload specialist. He managed to balance a serious attention to detail with a very playful side. He humbly understood his unique place in history as Israel's first astronaut, and he was keenly aware of the significance of items that he flew in space, each with a profound story. He adored his wife and 4 children. He and his family blessed all of us with teaching us Jewish traditions and serving us extremely delicious food. Just as NASA has pursued lessons learned from the tragedies listed behind me on the space mirror, we have all had personal journeys to walk. There have been lessons learned from all of our experiences as well. For a brief few minutes, please allow me to share some thoughts and insights from the past 10 years. The night before they flew, we said our goodbyes, and Rick talked to the crew and to the spouses. He shared a little bit about his faith and its importance to him in his life, and he quoted a passage verse out of Joshua 1:6-9. It concludes with, "Have I not commanded you? Be strong and courageous. Do not be terrified. Do not be discouraged, for the Lord your God will be with you wherever you go." Columbia's 16-day mission in space accomplished over 80 experiments by the crew on a 24/7 schedule. They worked so well together. The mission was a tremendous success, with great results being obtained throughout the mission. Our families were very proud of the crew and arrived here in Florida the evening before the landing day. We all shared a meal together at a local restaurant. I went to bed with the NASA channel left on quietly in the background, and I fell asleep, thanking God for the great mission, and I was so excited for the reunion with my husband. That morning, we woke up early and quickly prepared to head to the landing site. Before departing the hotel, my children each watched their recorded video that Rick had made for them to view each day that he was in space. He read devotionals to them, talked to them about his faith, and he prayed with them. He also warned them that the weather wasn't just right. They might have to stay in orbit a day or two longer, but he reassured them that it wouldn't be too long before we would all be reunited. February 1st, 2003 became a traumatic, shocking day. Anticipating a joyful homecoming of our crew, we were jolted in the viewing area into a nightmarish stroll of fear, uncertainty, and horror that led to a crushing announcement that the crew had perished during re-entry. Words of sorrow, efforts to comfort, even fathoming the magnitude of loss was overwhelming that day. Looks of disbelief from one family member to another brought little comfort. The shock was so intense that even tears were not freely able to fall. They would come in the weeks, months, and years to follow, in waves and in buckets. Rick and I shared together a belief in Jesus Christ. Rick was not one to proselytize those around him, but his actions and words revealed a devout Christ follower. His favorite verse that he signed on his astronaut pictures was Proverbs 3, 5, and 6. Trust in the Lord with all your heart, and do not lean on your own understanding. In all your ways acknowledge him, and he will direct your paths. That morning, I clearly remember looking at the sky in disbelief, that my beloved was not going to pop through a thin layer of clouds any moment and remove the panic and the fear that was rising in my heart. I needed to trust, even though no one understood what was happening. In the middle of all that, we didn't know. All that I didn't know, I knew that God was sovereign, meaning that he's in control. Had Rick and his crew really given the ultimate sacrifice? As moments rolled into days and days into years, the grief journey has been difficult, complicated, and surprising. It has been a front row viewing, rubber meets the road experience. The sorrow and impact of the tragedy of all of our families has been extreme. But just as a forest fire reduces beautiful foliage into ashes, those ashes ultimately become nourishment for new, healthy growth. There are indeed small green shoots of hope that are springing up in our lives. The human spirit, created by God, began to minister to my family. The determination of the folks in East Texas to do it right and to do it with honor was a reflection of the best as they tackled the tsunami of accident debris over hundreds of miles and accommodated the invasion of the thousands who came to help with the recovery process. Their graciousness and hospitality will be forever appreciated and remembered. Friends and family cared for us, and countless thousands of others prayed for us. To all of you, I want to say thank you. Our hearts were devastated, wounded. Psalm 147:3 says that God heals the brokenhearted and binds up their wounds. It takes time to heal, lots of time, but healing is possible. I mentioned earlier that the journey has been difficult, complicated, and surprising. Sudden loss triggers a tidal wave of reaction that seems to take a lifetime to untangle and to resolve. But I have personally been really surprised with blessings that come from such hardship. The Old Testament book of Isaiah talks in chapter 61 about those who grieve, receiving a crown of beauty instead of ashes. the oil of joy instead of mourning, and a garment of praise instead of a spirit of despair.